With the number of public mishaps going on with numerous companies, unconscious bias training, sometimes called sensitivity training, has become a popular topic of discussion. First, to understand how decisions are made at work, how inclusive organizational cultures are built and sustained, and how individuals can take conscious control of their actions, behaviors, and cultural contributions, we need to understand the unconscious mind. What is an unconscious bias? Unconscious biases are the automatic, mental shortcuts used to process information and make decisions very quickly. At any given time, an individual can be flooded with millions of bits of information. But the thing is, the human mind can only consciously process about 40. Cognitive filters allow the mind to unconsciously prioritize, generalize, and dismiss large volumes of input. These shortcuts can be useful when making decisions with limited information, focus, or time, but can sometimes lead individuals in the wrong direction and have unintended consequences in the workplace. Unconscious bias can prevent individuals from making the most objective decisions. They can cause people to overlook great ideas, undermine individual potential, and create a less than ideal work experience for their colleagues. By understanding unconscious bias and overcoming it at critical moments, individuals can make better decisions. From finding the best talent, no matter what the background, to acknowledging a great idea, no matter who it came from. This will build a workforce and workplace that supports and encourages diverse perspectives and contributions. The scientific evidence demonstrating the negative effects of unconscious bias is well documented, but there's still a lot to learn about how to mitigate it. Combating unconscious bias is hard because their influence on our decisions in a given moment doesn't feel wrong. It feels intuitively right. In order to create a workplace that supports and encourages diverse perspectives, talents, and ideas, you need to give people the platform and tools that give people's first thoughts a second look. Making the unconscious conscious is critical to create a welcoming and inclusive workplace for everyone. There is often skepticism surrounding the effectiveness of unconscious bias training, so it's necessary to examine the value of the training as well as areas for improvement. The first step towards impacting unconscious bias is awareness. We must have an understanding that this issue exists in the first place. No one is exempt from having bias and being prejudiced. A tool like the Harvard Implicit Association Test, IAT, is one way to gauge our levels of bias in different areas. The IAT aims to measure our implicit or unconscious bias based on race, religion, gender, and a vast array of other areas. In addition to understanding our blind spots, more discussions must take place in order to influence our bias. If discussions about bias and prejudice are normalized, this removes some of the stigma and defensiveness that often accompanies any sort of bias training. In order for unconscious bias training to be effective, it has to be ongoing and long-term. The main criticism of unconscious bias training is that for most companies, it was only a one-day training. It is impossible to change long-term behaviors, stereotypes, and perceptions via one-day training. How can you possibly expect to eradicate learned stereotypes and bias when individuals spent their entire lives thinking in a certain way? In order for unconscious bias training to be effective, it has to be done frequently. A one-time training is simply not effective and is a waste of time, money, and effort. It's essential to look at the linkage between unconscious bias and behaviors. Because unconscious bias is not something we are actively aware of, it in itself is difficult to actually eradicate. It is a more effective practice to analyze how unconscious bias can manifest in the workplace, when hiring employees, evaluating employee performance, and in the overall treatment of employees. If we understand some of the many ways in which our biases seep into our work behaviors, we may be better equipped to improve those behaviors. Once employees have an understanding of behaviors that are the result of individual biases, alternative behaviors can be implemented without even realizing it. For example, when evaluating male and female job candidates, we often revert to our preconceived gender norms and societal gender roles. Our unconscious associations can lead to bias in the hiring and selection of job candidates. To solve this issue, removing any gender-specific information from a resume or cover letter can make the hiring process more equitable. Bias can be thought of as a malleable and quickly adapting entity. It is important to anticipate situations which are likely to lead to bias or have led to discrimination in the past and create systems to eliminate or lessen the likelihood of these behaviors from occurring. Research indicates that teamwork can affect bias. When allocating tasks at work, work teams can be an effective way to reduce prejudice. Another aspect of unconscious bias training should include the standardization of company policies, protocol, and procedures. Managers should be uniformly trained, and the job selection process should focus on objective and quantifiable measures. A review of policies and procedures can identify biased policies, and modification should take place. Lastly, when unconscious bias training is implemented, it is imperative to have measures in place to assess incremental changes and progress. How will you learn whether the training was successful if you don't know what point you started from? Data should be collected at several stages of the training intervention, which can ensure the effectiveness of the training. Simply learning about our hidden biases is not sufficient. Successful training also must help participants to identify and build skills to overcome these biases. That said, it is unrealistic to expect that our unconscious biases will melt away after a single training program. Follow-up training and/or coaching will help to reinforce the original training. Metrics that demonstrate changes in behavior, such as the percentages of underrepresented candidates selected for development programs, should be a part of any follow-up to demonstrate the commitment to take action. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.